Hi, it's Cassandra with Vine. We just learned that Black Beauty had to leave Jerry after Jerry became too ill to continue cab work. Now we'll read to the end of the book and find out how Black Beauty spends the end of his days. Let's begin. Chapter 47. Hard Times. I shall never forget my new master. He had black eyes and a hooked nose. His mouth was as full of teeth as a bulldog's, and his voice was as harsh as the grinding of cartwheels over gravel stones. His name was Nicholas Skinner, and I believe he was the same man that poor Seedy Sam drove for. I have heard men say that seeing is believing, but I should feel that feeling is believing. For much as I had seen, I never knew till now the utter misery of a cab horse's life. Skinner had a low set of cabs and a low set of drivers. He was hard on the men, and the men were hard on the horses. In this place we had no Sunday rest, and it was in the heat of the summer. Sometimes on a Sunday morning, a party of fast men would hire a cab for the day, 4 of them inside and another with the driver, and I had to take them 10 or 15 miles out into the country and back again. Never would any of them get down to walk up a hill, let it be ever so steep, or the day ever so hot, unless indeed when the driver was afraid I should not manage it, and sometimes I was so fevered and worn that I could hardly touch my food. How I used to long for the nice bran mash with nither in it that Jerry used to give us on Saturday nights in hot weather, that used to cool us down and make us so comfortable. Then we had 2 nights and a whole day for unbroken rest, and on Monday morning we were as fresh as young horses again. But here there was no rest, and my driver was just as hard as his master. He had a cruel whip with something so sharp at the end that sometimes it drew blood, and he would whip me under the belly and flip the lash out of my head. Indignities like these took the heart out of me terribly, and still I did my best and never hung back, for, as poor Ginger said, it was no use. Men are the strongest. My life was now so utterly wretched that I wished I might, like Ginger, drop down dead at my work and be out of my misery. And one day my wish very nearly came to pass. I went to the stand at 8 in the morning, and had done a good share of work when we had to take a fare to the railway. A long train was just expected in, so my driver pulled up to the back of some of the outside cabs to take a chance at a return fare. It was a very heavy train. And as all the cabs were soon engaged, ours was called for. There was a party of 4, a noisy, blustering man with a lady, a little boy, and a young girl, and a great deal of luggage. The lady and the boy got into the cab, and while the man ordered about the luggage, the young girl came and looked at me. "Papa," she said, "I am sure this poor horse cannot take us and all our luggage so far. He is so very weak and worn out. Do look at him." "Oh, he's all right, miss," said the driver. "He's strong enough." The porter, who was pulling about some heavy boxes, suggested to the gentleman, as there was so much luggage, whether he would not take a second cab. "Can your horse do it, or can't he?" said the blustering man. "Oh, he'll do it all right, sir. Send up the boxes, porter." He could take more than that, and he helped to haul a box so heavy that I could feel the springs go down. "Papa, Papa, do take a second cab," said the young girl in a beseeching tone. "I'm sure we are wrong. I'm sure it is very cruel." "Nonsense, Grace. Get in at once, and don't make all this fuss. A pretty thing it would be if a man of business had to examine every cab horse before he hired it. The man knows his own business, of course. There, get in and hold your tongue." My gentle friend had to obey, and box after box was dragged up and lodged to the top of the cab, or settled by the side of the driver. At last all was ready, and with his usual jerk at the rein and slash of the whip, he drove out of the station. The load was very heavy, and I had neither food nor rest since the morning, but I did my best, as I had always done, in spite of cruelty and injustice. I got along fairly until we came to Ludgate Hill, but there the heavy load and my own exhaustion were too much. I was struggling to keep on, goaded by constant chucks of the rein and use of the whip, when, in a single moment, I cannot tell how, my feet slipped from under me, and I fell heavily on the ground on my side. The suddenness and the force with it, which I fell, seemed to beat all the breath out of my body. I lay perfectly still. Indeed, I had no power to move, and I thought now I was going to die. I heard a sort of confusion round me, loud, angry voices, and the getting down of luggage, but it was all like a dream. I thought I heard that sweet, pitiful voice saying, "Oh, that poor horse, it's our fault." Someone came and loosened the throat strap of my bridle and undid the traces which kept the collar so tight upon me. Someone said, "He's dead. He'll never get up again." Then I could hear the policeman giving orders, but I did not open my eyes. I could only draw a gasping breath now and then. Some cold water was thrown over my head, and some cordial was poured into my mouth, and something was covered over me. I cannot tell how long I lay there, but I found my life coming back, and a kind-voiced man was patting me and encouraging me to rise. After some more cordial had been given to me, and after 1 or 2 attempts, I staggered to my feet and was gently led to some stables, which were close by. Here I was put into a well-littered stall, and some warm gruel was brought to me, which I drank thankfully. In the evening I was successfully recovered to be led back to Skinner's stables, where I think they did the best for me they could. In the morning, Skinner came with the farrier to look at me. He examined me very closely and said, "This is a case of overwork more than disease, and if you could give him a run-off for 6 months he would be able to work again. But now there's not an ounce of strength in him." "Then he must just go to the dogs," said Skinner. "I've no meadows to nurse sick horses. He might get well, or he might not. That sort of thing doesn't suit my business. My plan is to work 'em as long as they go, and sell 'em for that which they'll fetch, to the knacker or elsewhere." "If he was broken-winded," said the farrier, "you had better have him killed out of hand, but he's not. There is a sale of horses coming off in about 10 days. If you rest him and feed him up, he may pick up. You may get more than his skin is worth, at any rate." Upon this advice, Skinner, rather unwillingly, I think, gave orders that I should be well fed and cared for, and the stableman, happily for me, carried out the orders with much better will than his master had in giving them. 10 days of perfect rest, plenty of good oats, hay, bran mash, with boiled linseed mixed in them, did more to get my condition than anything could have done. Those linseed mashes were delicious, and I began to think, after all, it might be better to live than to go to the dogs. When the 12th day came after the accident, I was taken to the sale, a few miles out of London. I felt that any change from my present place must be an improvement, so I held up my head and hoped for the best. Chapter 48. Farmer Thorogood and his grandson Willie. At the sale, of course, I found myself in company with the old broken-down horses, some lame, some broken-winded, some old, and some that I'm sure it would have been merciful to shoot. The buyers and sellers, too, many of them, looked not much better off than the poor beasts they were bargaining about. There were poor old men trying to get a horse or a pony for a few pounds that might drag about some little wood or coal cart. There were poor men trying to sell a worn-out beast for 2 or 3 pounds rather than have the greater loss of killing him. Some of them looked as if poverty and hard times had hardened them all over, but there were others that I would have willingly used the last of my strength in serving. Poor and shabby, but kind and human, with voices I could trust. There was one tottering old man that took a great fancy to me, and I to him. But I was not strong enough. It was an anxious time. Coming from the better part of the fair, I noticed a man who looked like a gentleman farmer, with a young boy by his side. He had a broad back and round shoulders, a kind, ruddy face, and wore a broad-brimmed hat. When he came up to me and my companions, he stood still and gave a pitiful look round us. I saw his eye rest on me. I still had a good mane and tail, which did something for my appearance. I pricked my ears and looked at him. There's a horse, Willie, that has known better days." "Poor old fellow," said the boy. "Do you think, Grandpa, he was ever a carriage horse?" "Oh, yes, my boy," said the farmer, coming closer. "He might have been anything when he was young. Look at his nostrils and his ears, the shape of his neck and shoulders. There's a deal of breeding about that horse." He put out his hand and gave me a kind pat on the neck. I put out my nose in answer to his kindness. The boy stroked my face. "Poor old fellow. See, Grandpa, how well he understands kindness. Could not you buy him and make him young again, as you did with Ladybird?" "My dear boy, I can't make all the old horses. young. Besides, Lady Bird was not so very old, as she was run down and badly used. Well, Grandpa, I don't believe that this one is old. Look at his mane and tail. I wish you would look into his mouth, and then you could tell. Though he's so very thin, his eyes are not sunk like some old horses. The old gentleman laughed. Bless the boy, he is as horsey as his old grandfather. But do look at his mouth, Grandpa, and ask the price. I'm sure he would grow young in our meadows. The man who had brought me for sale now put in his word. The young gentleman's a real knowing one, sir. Now the fact is that this hoss just pulled down with overwork in the cabs. He's not an old one. I heard how the veterinary say that a 6 months run-off would set him right up, being as how his wind was not broken. I've had the tending of him these past 10 days, and a gratefuller, pleasanter animal I never met with, and 'twould be worth a gentleman's while to give him £5 note for him, and let him have a chance. I'll be bound he'll be worth £20 next spring. The old gentleman laughed, and the little boy looked up eagerly. Oh, Grandpa, did you not say the colt sold for £5 more than you expected? You would not be poorer if you did buy this one. The farmer slowly felt my legs, which were much swelled and strained, and he looked at my mouth. 13 or 14, I should say. Just trot him out, will you? I arched my poor thin neck, raised my tail a little, and threw out my legs as well as I could, for they were very stiff. What's the lowest you'll take for him? Said the farmer as I came back. £5, sir. That was the lowest price my master set. 'Tis a speculation, said the old gentleman, shaking his head, but at the same time slowly drawing out his purse. Quite a speculation. Have you any more business here? He said, counting the sovereigns into his hand. No, sir. I can take him for you to the inn, if you please. Do so. I am now going there. They walked forward, and I was led behind. The boy could hardly control his delight, and the old gentleman seemed to enjoy his pleasure. I had good feed at the end, and then was gently ridden home by a servant of my new master's, and turned into a large meadow with a shed in one corner. Mr. Thorogood, for that was the name of my benefactor, gave orders that I should have hay and oats every night and morning, and the run of the meadow during the day. And you, Willie, he said, must take oversight of him. I give him in charge to you. The boy was very proud of his charge, and undertook it in all seriousness. There was not a day that he did not pay me a visit, sometimes picking me out among the other horses, giving me a bit of carrot or something good, or sometimes standing by me while I ate my oats. He always came with kind words and caresses, and of course I grew very fond of him. He called me Old Crony, as I used to come to him in the fields and follow him about. Sometimes he brought his grandfather, who always looked closely at my legs. This is our point, Willie, he would say, but he is improving so steadily that I think we shall see a change for the better in the spring. The perfect rest, the good food, the soft turf, and the gentle exercise soon began to tell on my condition and my spirits. I had a good constitution from my mother, and I was never strained when I was young, so I had a better chance than many horses who have been worked before they came to their full strength. During the winter my legs improved so much that I began to feel quite young again. The spring came round, and one day in March Mr. Thorogood determined that he would try me in the phaeton. I was well pleased, and he and Willie drove me a few miles. My legs were not stiff now, and I did the work with perfect ease. He's growing young, Willie. We must give him a little gentle work now, and by midsummer he will be as good as Lady Bird. He has a beautiful mouth and good paces. They can't be better. Oh, Grandpa, how glad I am you bought him. So am I, my boy, but he has to thank you more than me. We must now be looking for a quiet, genteel place for him, where he will be valued. Chapter 49. My Last Home. One day, during the summer, the groom cleaned and dressed me with such extraordinary care that I thought some new change must be at hand. He trimmed my fetlocks and legs, passed the tar brush over my hooves, and even parted my forelock. I think the harness had extra polish. Willie seemed half anxious, half merry, as he got into the chase with his grandfather. If the ladies take to him, said the old gentleman, they'll be suited, and he'll be suited. We can but try. At the distance of a mile or two from the village, we came to a pretty low house, with a lawn and shrubbery on the front, and a drive up to the door. Willie rang the bell and asked if Miss Bloomfield or Miss Ellen was home. Yes, they were. So while Willie stayed with me, Mr. Thorogood went to the house. In about 10 minutes he returned, followed by 3 ladies. One tall, pale lady, wrapped in a white shawl, leaned on a younger lady with dark eyes and a merry face. The other, a very stately-looking person, was Miss Bloomfield. They all came and looked at me and asked questions. The younger lady, that was Miss Ellen, took to me very much. She said she was sure she should like me. I had such a good face. The tall, pale lady said she should always be nervous in riding behind a horse that had been once down, as I might come down again, and if I did, she should never get over the fright. You see, ladies, said Mr. Thorogood, many first-rate horses have had their knees broken through the carelessness of their drivers without any fault of their own. And from what I can see of this horse, I should say that is the case. But of course, I do not wish to influence you. If you incline, you can have him on trial, and then your coachman will see what he thinks of him. You've always been such a good adviser to us about our horses, said the stately lady, that your recommendation would go a long way with me. If my sister Leneva sees no objection, we'll accept your offer of a trial with thanks. It was then arranged that I should be sent for the next day. In the morning, a smart-looking young man came for me. At first he looked pleased, but when he saw my knees, he said in a disappointed voice, I didn't think, sir, you would have recommended my ladies a blemished horse like that. Handsome is that handsome does, said my master. You're only taking him on trial, and I'm sure you will do fairly by him, young man. And if he is not safe as any horse you've ever drove, send him back. I was led home, placed in a comfortable stable, fed, and left to myself. The next day, when my groom was cleaning my face, he said, That is just like the star that Black Beauty had. His was much the same height, too. I wonder where he is now. A little farther on, he came to the place in my neck where I was bled, and where a little knot was left in the skin. He almost started and began to look me over carefully, talking to himself. White star in the forehead, one white foot on the off side, just a little knot in just that place. Then looking in the middle of my back, and as I am alive, there's a little patch of white hair that John used to call Beauty's threepenny bit. It must be Black Beauty. Why, Beauty, Beauty, do you know me? Little Joe Green, that almost killed you. And he began patting and patting me as if he was quite overjoyed. I could not say I remembered him, for now he was a fine-grown young fellow, with black whiskers and a man's voice, but I was sure he knew me, and that he was Joe Green, and that I was very glad. I put my nose up to him and tried to say we were friends. I never saw a man so pleased. Give you a fair trial? I should think so indeed. I wonder who the rascal that broke your knees was, my old beauty. You must have been very badly served out somewhere. Well, it won't be my fault if you haven't good times of it now. I wish John Manley was here to see you. In the afternoon I was put into a low park chair and brought to the door. Miss Ellen was going to try me, and Green went with her. I soon found she was a good driver, and she seemed pleased with my paces. I heard Joe telling her about me, and that he was sure I was Squire Gordon's old Black Beauty. When we returned, the other sisters came out to hear how I had behaved myself. She told them what she had just heard and said, I shall certainly write to Mrs. Gordon and tell her that her favorite horse has come to us. How pleased she will be. After this I was driven every day for a week or so, and I appeared to be quite safe. Miss Lavina had ventured out into the small, close carriage. After this it was quite decided to keep me and call me by my old name of Black Beauty. I have now lived in this happy place a whole year. Joe is the best and kindest of grooms. My work is easy and pleasant, and I feel my strength and spirits all coming back again. Mr. Thorogood said to Joe the other day, In your place he will last till he is 20 years old, perhaps more. Willie always speaks to me when he can, and treats me as his special friend. My ladies have promised that I should never be sold, and so I have nothing to fear. And here my story ends. My troubles are all over, and I am at home. And often, before I'm quite awake, I fancy I'm still with old friends at Birkwick, standing with my old friends under the apple tree. The end. Thank you for joining me in the adventures of Black Beauty. Take care.